Hey, Intermediate Algebra, this is Mr. Sayre. I co-teach with Mr. Eshman's 6th hour, and so he and I are going to be going back and forth and doing notes for you guys for Intermediate Algebra. So if you're in his 4th or 8th hour and you're wondering why you're seeing me, it's because we're going to be sharing responsibility doing notes. So here's the set of notes for radicals, which is the next section. This is the assignment you guys are going to work on this week, and I'll show you how the notes work. All right. So first thing you're going to want to do is be able to answer this right here, because this is going to be what you're going to see on the first question. So it's going to ask you what each of these letters and symbols are. So N is the index, which is right up here. And then you have A, which is the radicand, which is the number or exponent or variable underneath the radical sign, which is down here. Okay, so make sure you refer back to these notes. We'll post these notes on Classroom too. So if we look at example 1 right here, we have the square root of 121. The problems you're going to be doing this time are called perfect squares. And so we chose perfect squares because they're a lot easier to start with than the other stuff that we'll get to. Okay, so for a perfect square, what I usually do, Mr. Eshman and I do, is we go ahead to our multiplication table, and we'll share this with you on Classroom as well. And then we go ahead and we locate 121. And if you just kind of go up, you see that it's 11 times 11. So the square root of 121 is just 11. All right. So next problem, example 2, is similar. The only difference, if you notice, is we've got this negative sign right out here. So what you do is if you see a negative outside, it automatically carries over to your answer. And if you look at that multiplication table, the square root of 9 is 3. And if you want, you can also use your calculator to do square roots. They'll do them just fine. And in fact, you're probably using it more often for that too. All right, example 3. Now, if you notice, this is a little different because we have a variable with an exponent in it. And so what we can do with that is when you see just a plain old square root, you're going to divide that exponent by 2. So your answer is going to be x squared because 4 divided by 2 is 2. Okay. Now I'm going to change this problem a little bit because that problem we will not be doing in this section. It's a little too hard, but we'll get to it. I'm going to change that to 16x squared, or 16 times x to the 4th, all under a square root sign. So same process that we did, except you're going to split up the numbers. So we have the number here. So the square root of 16 is 4. And then if you go ahead and look at x to the 4th, just like we did over here, you're going to divide that exponent by 2. And you get x squared. And that is your answer. All right. So far, so good. Pretty easy and straightforward. So here's the next example. And this one, you're just going to plug straight into a calculator. If you have a scientific calculator, great. If not, your phone can do this. You also have a calculator in your Chromebook. I'll show you how to do it on your Chromebook. So I'm going to open up my calculator on my Chromebook. If it's not full screen, make it full screen because you're going to want to have this button right here available to you. Because if you don't have that button, it's not going to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in the N, and there's a little root or the index that's right up there on our root, which in this case it was 3. And then I click on that button, and then I type the number that's underneath the radical sign. And then I just do equals, and it gives me the answer is 3. And so that's what I put on as my answer. It's just the third root of 27 is 3. All right. So this problem, if you notice, it's a little different because there's a negative sign underneath there. So with this problem, just like when you looked up here and you saw the negative out front, if you have an odd number outside, so 1, 3, 5, 7, your answer is going to automatically match the sign inside. So if it's a positive number, it's positive. If it's a negative number, it's a negative. So I'm going to make that a negative. And then I'm going to go head over to my calculator and type that in. So I have 3, funky root thing, 343, and then I hit enter, and that gives me 7. So my answer is negative 7. So the third root of negative 343 is negative 7. All right. Here is example number 7. So this is where you have to pay attention. Because if you have an even number outside and a negative number on the inside, the answer is no real number. And that'll be an option on MyMathLab. Okay? Because if I were to type that in my calculator, actually, I don't know if it'll let me. Let's see. We're going to do 4 that, and I think I have to do parentheses if I'm not mistaken. See if it'll let me do that. Let's try it. Do parentheses. Oh, it's not working. So I'm going to do 4. It won't let me do parentheses. So it's not going to work. I don't think it'll let me do it. No, it won't. So if you see it, you got to use your brain because the calculator on here is not fancy enough to figure that out. So again, if you see those problems, you're probably going to like them because that'll work. All right. The other example that you're going to have is right here when you have a number other than, well, you have a number out here. So what you're going to do is what we did before is you're going to take that exponent and divide it by that number when you see it outside. So that would be x to the 6th, which is 24 divided by 4. All right. And then the last example kind of combines all the things we were doing so far into one problem. So if you remember, for 4, if we have just a number, you take the square root of it, which, to review, if you go to your multiplication table, I'm going to find 16 over here. It's right there. And then I look up and I've got 4 or 4. So what I'm going to do is then my answer right here is 4. And then just like before, when there's no number outside of here, I'm going to divide each of these exponents by 2. So I'm going to get a squared b to the 9th. That's some terrible handwriting. Let me rewrite that. A squared b to the 9th. All right, because I just divided those by 2. And right there is your answer. So what we want you to do, you have an assignment on MyMathLab that Mr. Eshman and I would like you to complete. Please do it by Wednesday. And then after you do that, it's the first thing you got to do. And then the next thing you got to do is on Wednesday or Thursday, we'll post a quiz on MyMathLab that we'd like you to also complete. So that's what we want you guys to do by the end of the week is review these notes and then go ahead and get that done and that done. And again, that'll all be on MyMathLab. We'll be posting more information on Google Classroom as we go. So, and these notes as well. And let either Mr. Eshman or myself know if you have any questions. All right. Thanks.